All right, guys, welcome to this episode of Blood Money. This is actually an episode that we released close to a year ago. A whistleblower comes out about Boris Epshteyn. Now, recently we've heard these claims that Boris Epshteyn has been asking for money for connections to connect people within the Trump campaign. And this is something that we heard during this expose. So we thought it would be important to re-release this episode. The goal of such episodes has been to protect Donald J. Trump and protect the America First movement in order to make sure that the kind of corruption we've seen on the Democrat side does not plague the America First movement. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Make sure you subscribe to americahappens.com. Thank you. All right, so welcome to the latest Blood Money episode. For this episode, we actually have an individual that has inside knowledge about the Trump campaign. And this individual, whose identity will remain a secret because of safety concerns, has been collecting information over the last couple of years having to do with a potential mole within the Trump campaign that has been tasked with doing things that are negative to the Trump campaign, meaning even bringing the Trump campaign down. So we're going to interview this gentleman. So, let's just dive right into it. You've been collecting information about a gentleman named Boris Epshteyn, who is integrally involved with the Trump campaign, seems to have Donald Trump's trust. Now, let's, explain to me what is the nature of the information you've collected and what kind of concerns has that brought on once you've discovered this information?
The information that I've obtained, most of it is actually from public sources. Some of it is from personal observation, but most of it is from public sources. And taken on its own, each piece of information may not make sense to people, but when you put together a jigsaw puzzle, you can see the picture. And for me and a whole bunch of other people that have worked for getting 45 back into office, and even before that, the picture's pretty clear. We're afraid to talk about it in public. We're afraid to talk about it over text messages, phone calls. It's really a hush-hush thing, and the people who've really pushed this are no longer associated with former President Donald Trump.
So are you saying that they were pushed out of the Trump campaign by potentially ill-meaning parties or an ill-meaning party?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They were pushed out, they were relegated, they were besmirched, and they're no longer allowed to take part. Some are trying desperately to get back in.
Let's get into some of the details about the Mr. Boris Epshteyn. Let's go through this in chronological order about some of the evidence you've collected, things that are within the public domain that when put together might insinuate that this gentleman is actually within the Trump campaign for, negative, ill results.
Well, it didn't come chronological order to me or to the group of individuals, that I'm familiar with here. It came kind of like as a shock, one after another. But if you want to go back from the beginning, obviously we did digging after we thought that there was a concern. And I think the thing that really sparked us to start the digging was after President Trump was elected and after a lot of people were brought into the White House and put to work. One individual in particular couldn't get a security clearance, and that was Mr. Epshteyn. A lot of people wanted to know why. We were told, don't ask. And we didn't, because if you like your job, you don't ask questions you're not supposed to. But that really was a concern, because why wouldn't this guy who was a campaign advisor and who had worked on the McCain campaign as well, why wouldn't he be able to get a security clearance? And so it kind of, brought up some issues, with people. And, you tend to look and say, hey, I wonder why, when you have a free moment, which you rarely do. And that's really what started it here. And that was obviously, that was 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. So a lot has developed since then.
We're talking about 2017.
Yeah, 2017.
Okay.
Right, okay. Right. And, normally I thought that somebody who doesn't have a security clearance would, just be relegated and fired and be gone. But no, he he managed to stick around and embed himself further. So, a lot of us are asking ourselves, what was it? And if President Trump gets reelected, will he also not be able to work in the White House if he's still around? Because who knows what's going on.
Well, all right. So let's go through some of the other piece of evidence that would indicate what you're saying to be true.
Well, what we turned up, and I think you have some of the links, and a lot of this information was compiled by different people. A lot of it was compiled by some research, online. But apparently, Mr. Epshteyn, came over. He's not American born. His parents were Russian, and he came over here, and it was interesting to see what happened with his father. But it looked to us like when he was in school, he was kind of pushed toward getting close to President Trump through association with his son, Eric. He was put into the same school that Eric went to, and which, by the way, is a school that some three-letter agencies here go to recruit people for jobs. And,
are you allowed to say what the name of the school is?
Yeah. Well, I'd rather not, but I think you have it there.
Okay.
I don't want to, I don't want to besmirch anybody or just, really talk about it. But it was in Washington D.C. And where he befriended Eric Trump, and then he got invited to a whole bunch of social events with Eric's dad, and that's how we originally got close to him. But I just think it's funny because it's kind of the same thing that Michael Cohen did to get close. Michael Cohen befriended Don Jr., and then that's how he got close. And Boris, who people around former president call him Michael Cohen 2.0. And by the way, Michael and him did not get along. In fact, Michael, and as much of a liar as he's been, and whatever, he immediately hated Boris. They immediately didn't get along. I mean, I think they had a lot in common, and people can see themselves in each other, and that was also a tell.
Wow. All right, keep going.
And I might not get everything in order because there's a lot here, but what happened next, of course, is he started promoting for Trump, and he's been on a lot of TV shows and everything, and I think the former president really likes him because he's a big guy, and President Trump's like big, assertive, strong people like himself.
Physically big.
Yeah, physically big. Not like workout big, but like, likes to eat a lot of food big, and intimidating, and which he definitely is. And he's been known to use four-letter words very freely, even in professional situations where it's uncalled for, but that's not here or there. So I guess, what happened next is at some point he got involved in promoting, and this is going back to 2000, I believe it's 2013. He was promoting business for Moscow in the Invest in Moscow conference around October 2013. This is what we found, and this is online. This is nothing private, but we thought it was odd that he was actually working with the Moscow city government, and including Sergei Chermin, who was a city minister, involved also in. And I believe he was the head of Moscow's Foreign Economic and International Relations department in the government, and also some other people who had ties to the FSB over there, which is kind of the Russian equivalent of the CIA.
Wow.
So we don't know what the relationship is. We can guess about why he's promoting Moscow in America around about 2013, and also involved in the McCain campaign as well. So that was really interesting and really troublesome, and we didn't know, understanding that he couldn't get a security clearance, whether he had some association or former association with the FSB. We don't know why, but it was something to be concerned about. And it's worth mentioning that while he was working on the McCain campaign, that he got involved with a young lady who is now an MSNBC host named Nicole. And, they've stayed, quote unquote, friends since then. And, we can talk about that later.
He has a wife, or?
Yeah, he's married with kids. He married into a fairly prominent family. And, I've never met any of those people or anything, but, you hear and you read, and it becomes really interesting. It's almost like this is a movie that was thrust into real life. And hopefully someday somebody will make it into a movie.
Everything we're talking about is going to be in the descriptions in chronological order with links, so you can see this all for yourself and make your own decision if what this gentleman is saying, does it have weight to it? Is it true? I mean, there's a lot of information here. So let's talk a little bit about this P-tape. There was a rumor. Obviously, there's no evidence of this particular rumor, but let's talk about the P-tape rumor that has been going around the Trump campaign.
Well, this is something that we read about also, where the Steele dossier had a source that was referred to using similar letters to Boris's name, B-E, and we didn't know at that particular time. We didn't think it was anything, but there was a lot of chatter, and there is a lot of chatter going on about that, about who he was really working with. And then somebody brought up, and once again, none of this, we're not saying any of this is factual. We don't know. But when you have so many coincidences, and the saying is, if it quacks like a duck, it looks like a duck, it smells like a duck, and it walks like a duck, it's probably not a lion. And that's really what made us really come together and think, wow, this is unbelievable. How can this be happening? And how can President Trump not know what's going on? And, a lot of us can tell you that we can't get close, or anybody can't get close to him, because Boris has a gauntlet and is very careful about who has access, to President Trump, at least from his legal team. So it's definitely siphoned off. There's a choke point, and everybody else stays on the other side of the fence.
What is it about that P-tape that the rumor from what I understand is that Boris Epshteyn might have created that rumor, like he actually came up with the idea. What is it that would indicate that, based upon what you've heard?
Well, there's just been reports, third-party reports, going back all the way to the Steele dossier, that was him, that he was the guy that did this. And this is before he was even more well-known on working, with Trump. So I don't know where that came from. I don't have any first or even secondhand information about that. But I just think it's interesting that it's out there, because it was an attempt to take down the former president. And why would somebody be doing that? He didn't have any personal reason to take him down. And so, you got to think, okay, well, who's he working with? And we all know that the intelligence agencies were part of the Steele dossier, especially after the Durham report. And so was he part of that? We don't know, but it's just one of a series of things that, were brought to our attention that maybe makes sense when you put everything together, which people really have to look at. But that's just an aside. That's just glitter. The real meat and potatoes is what's going on now.
So let me ask you, in terms of there's a few things here, like what I was talking about before, where MSNBC did a sweetheart piece on Boris. Talk a little bit about that, because that to me doesn't make sense, because they don't necessarily do sweetheart pieces on people that are on the right side, especially associated with Trump.
Well, when I saw that, I was blown away, because Ari Melber and MSNBC hate Donald Trump as much as they hate nails on a chalkboard. But apparently, and this is confirmed, Nicole Wallace, who's also one of the top hosts for MSNBC, she and Boris were part of the McCain campaign, stayed close, and rumors, and once again, I have no firsthand knowledge of this, but rumors are that they were more than close and more than friends, and stayed that way for a while, even though one or both of them were married. Nicole got divorced in 2019. Once again, rumors were that he may have been the reason. I don't know, but I've heard more than one person talk about it over a beer. And, it's kind of, rumors go around Washington all the time, but that one was interesting. And even after that, it just seems that Nicole Wallace and MSNBC were getting information that only, Boris or the Trump campaign had knowledge of. They were the first to know things, which I thought was interesting. And then all of a sudden, Nicole Wallace's best friend and, co-anchor on a lot of stuff, Ari Melber, is doing a piece on Boris, which is basically complimenting him and saying, this guy was in the middle of a shitstorm, for lack of a better term, and everybody around him got indicted, and everybody around him got in trouble, but he was apparently smart enough to keep himself out, and let's see what happens, but, this guy is somebody to watch. And why would Ari Melber, who hates everything red, every Republican, why would Ari Melber be doing, I don't know, was it 10, 15-minute beautified piece on Boris Epshteyn?
You know what? The one thing I want to point out there that doesn't make sense to me is that, they've been going after this Russia hoax, right? And now you have a gentleman that is directly linked to actual Russian politicians and is having a conference in Moscow in 2013, physical, actual evidence with contact, right? And yet he's got fluff pieces on the mainstream news. That is very odd.
Yeah. Nobody mentions him really, which is interesting. And the fact that he's protected is even more interesting. He's always one step ahead of the game. And anybody who knows him, and I'm not going to say I know him really well, but anybody who knows him knows that he's a couple eggs short of a dozen. He's barely smart enough to keep his head above water, and he uses his, obnoxious self in order to scare people. And if he's ever challenged, he'll try and frighten people down. He's not a logical person. He's a good speaker. He's a good arguer, but he doesn't have the wits about him to keep his head above water on everything that's happened to him so far. It looks like, and everybody agrees, that he's got some protection from somebody. And we know it's not President Trump. It's somebody in the government that's protecting him.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about this idea that, from what I'm reading here, that he is essentially the intermediary between any lawyers and Trump. So any lawyers that actually want to speak with Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, have to go through him. I mean, firstly, how was that arranged, and why does that even exist as one person that is literally the gatekeeper?
Well, I can't tell you how it came about. I think it was probably slowly, over a long period of time, earning, former President Trump's trust. But basically, any of the Trump legal team that works for him now or that wants to work for him was brought on by Boris. And if they don't agree with the way that Boris wants to work, they're not going to work for Boris. I don't want to give you individual names of attorneys who've been thrown to the side by Boris, because that's only known by a couple of people, and I don't want to be outed because of that. But, you can look at Tim Parlatore, who basically, came in and then had to deal with Boris in terms of doing a job defending the president, and he wasn't having any of it. And there were other lawyers as well. But Tim went out of his way to let everybody know what happened. And he went out of his way to let everybody know that Boris was the problem.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's written about it. He's been on all the major news networks about it. And it's look, he's a stand-up guy, and he's not afraid of anything or anybody. And it was shocking to everybody that even after that happened, President Trump still, was slow to recognize the issue. And I think something that people believe is that there's so much litigation going on right now that Boris is handling completely for President Trump, that if he were to go away, if Boris was to go away, there would be complete chaos in the Trump legal team. And that's something that, I don't know, can't be handled. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think things are going to really come to a head soon, because there's some things that are going on with, the Jack Smith case, the trials in Georgia, that are going to expose, Boris for what we believe that he is.
Okay, so let's talk about, and by the way, we're gonna get into some information that's very incriminating in my opinion. But let's talk about this Washington post flattering piece about Boris. So we already talked about the MSNBC piece, but then Washington Post also writes another flattering piece about Boris.
Why? I don't know. They didn't write anything flattering about anybody else associated with the former president. We all know who controls the Washington Post. We all know who controls MSNBC. It's the same type of people. It's the same intelligence agencies that are pushing their agenda through these news organizations. And, people can read for themselves what it said. But the question is why? It doesn't make any sense. And the only thing that we can think of is that, we can just use it to say, hey, look, I'm doing such a good job that even our opponents think I'm doing a good job. And that's why I have to stick around, because they see me as a threat. And, that's how probably he justifies all this other crap that he's created. Look, it's public information. If somebody can't get a security clearance, it's trying to work for the government, which is basically the government is for the people. That's out there, and you can make a Freedom of Information Act and get information, but I don't think you can get the why. You can't get the security clearance reports. But yeah, a whole bunch of people came out about that and were very concerned, and other people were surprised that he still was able to stick around. His wife's uncle, I guess, was trying to bring Boris, who says that he's an investment banker, into the realm of things, basically trying to give him work, trying to do things with him. And there was a couple of instances, and nobody had firsthand information about this, but this is all public information. And the public information is basically that his uncle, and I prefer not to say his name, but anyway, it's his wife's uncle, and his last name of Newman, brought him early into a company called I believe it was West America Securities, which, by the way, FINRA, which governs investment bankers, banned in 2013. So Boris was the managing director of business and legal affairs. And of course, Boris is a registered broker who was brought into this company. Half of that company was owned by his uncle, and half of his wife's uncle, and half of the company was owned by a guy called Robert Bryan Kay. And by the way, Robert Bryan Kay is also FINRA banned. And the how can I say? I believe that had to do with Brazilian bonds that were being offered to clients, purportedly held Brazilian bonds, face values of about $875 million, and Japanese bonds that supposedly had a value of $23 billion. And it had something to do with unverified representations of people whose identities weren't verified to get money to invest in these things. And I guess everything just went south and they were worthless. There was a series of letters and receipts, and this is all public information.
So this is, you're talking about like massive fraud. You're talking about people invested in bonds that then were worthless. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And this is his wife's uncle.
His wife's uncle apparently brought him into this. This company was formed in 1993. Like I said, he was the managing director of business and legal affairs. Now, the one main owner, Robert Kay, got banned and got in a lot of trouble. But him and his uncle, nothing.
Nothing, wow.
I don't know why. I don't know what the difference was. And that was all around 2013. And then there was another company, which we found out about. And I believe that, if just looking at my notes here, is around a similar time, 2012 or 2015, it was called GeneSys Research Institute, like gene, like not a name, but genetics. So GeneSys Research Institute, and supposedly this company, which had a lot of government funding, had made some tremendous achievements in the fight against cancer, certain types of cancer, and it was run by some very, very well-known scientists, which, how can I say, was, gave it real credibility. But apparently, once again, it looks like Charles Newman, Boris's wife's uncle, and a guy, I don't know who he is, David Horowitz, but his name keeps popping up. They brought Boris in and put him on the board along with themselves. And then all of a sudden, once these guys got together and went on the board, the entire company collapsed and money allegedly became diverted away from the scientists.
I mean, are you telling me that this was essentially a controlled demolition of a cancer drug or a process to get rid of cancer that was potentially intimidating to the powers that be? Because we've heard a lot of stories about how breakthroughs like that are not necessarily good for the medical industrial complex. Are you saying that Boris and his allies were potentially put in a situation to destroy the company from the inside?
I'll let everybody make up their own minds, but, if you're looking at something that, it looks that way, and there was an article that we read, I think it was Commonwealth Magazine, which was suppressed. If you look even at Google searches, it's hard to find it, which also tells who controls Google searches, and it basically was talking about Horowitz, Newman, and Epstein, and it said, regarding Horowitz and Newman, it said that there's a trail of personal bankruptcies and corporate fiscal mismanagement by Horowitz and Newman. The record includes judgments and fines against them involving stock fraud in Michigan, Minnesota, and New York, and a finding by a Massachusetts court judge that Horowitz was indigent in an eviction case against him, which didn't make any sense to me, but it looks like, there's a bunch of times that these guys did this. I don't know, but, that was pretty interesting. And once again, that article talks about how there were complaints made, to the authorities, to the Department of Justice, to the State Attorney General's office. And guess what? Nothing happened.
But Horowitz and Newman got into trouble.
I don't know that anybody actually got into trouble on that one. And these were government funds, and it looks like the patents were just either given away or all of the research was destroyed, from what I'm reading. Once again, I have no firsthand knowledge of this. This is all public information that's just being put together. But all of the research was destroyed, and nothing happened. There was, went into bankruptcy, and nothing.
Wow.
No repercussions for the people that did this, and the scientists were tremendously upset. They hired a private investigator to help them, and nothing really happened. His background in working with these companies as an investment banker, really sparks interest, because now, even currently, it says that he's working for a company called TGP Securities. And it also, once again, says he joined as the managing director of business and legal affairs, right? And so these guys, there's always somebody accusing somebody of fraud, but, 3 in a row, that's a little weird. And, there's a current complaint, I don't know, I haven't looked at it in a while, for $940,000 against, one of the founders and the company, that he is the managing director of business and legal affairs for. It has to do, I guess, with an investment that was given. And, something called Tandem Global Partners or something like that. And, it's not a good thing. On top of that, there was another case against the company from Sigma Development Corporation. So all of these fraud allegations are coming out of left field. You don't know why nothing's happening to him or why his name isn't mentioned anywhere. It's almost like he's got a guardian angel somewhere that is really protecting him. None of this makes sense. And that's why, we're talking to you. But this guy from, the current company, James Tomorrow, they were talking about, large multi-million-dollar, well, I guess it was $940,000 going back from 2014 to 2020. So the company was Pebbles Digital Media, and God knows what that was, but apparently somebody was convinced to invest in it and went south. And
Boris was on the board of that company.
No, I think he was the managing director.
Oh, wow, okay.
In charge of business and legal affairs. So, there's a lot of stuff there, and I just tell people, go and make up your own minds, go and take a look and see. But hey, nothing's going on that. And then of course, aside from that stuff, his investment banking background is, I would say, is not necessarily stellar. But then you have him being arrested twice, I believe, in Arizona. Once for, and this made the news, although it didn't make real mainstream media news. Once for, punching a guy in the face.
Okay, so let's talk about the punching the guy in the face, right?
Well, apparently he was at a bar drinking, and he got into some sort of argument with a guy, and I believe, Boris is a big guy. He's what, like 6'5", 6'6". He got into a fight with somebody, argued with somebody who was a foot shorter than him. And he punched him in the face, and he was arrested. Nothing happened to him.
And you're saying the mainstream media didn't talk about it?
It was covered, but it wasn't really, you wouldn't see it, on a front page of the New York Times or anything like that. I mean, I think normally they would say, wow, look at this is Trump's guy, and this is what he did. But it didn't get the coverage.
What year?
I think this was about 6 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he was out drinking apparently another time, I believe it was also in Arizona. And, this woman called the police saying that he had groped her. And the police came, and there's actually a video of that on the web showing, him being arrested, in front of a police van. It looks like he was intoxicated. I don't know. But I thought he was happily married. What's he doing in a bar drinking at night and then groping other women? So, hey, I'll leave it up to your listeners to figure that one out.
Interesting. Wow. And, we've heard stories like Russell Brand where something that he did or might have done 25 years ago, he's getting persecuted for with no due process. But then you have an individual here that's been arrested twice for what seems like violent or obscene actions, and mainstream media is not going after him.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that is, but this is all background information stuff, and it's not even the worst stuff, and now, he's got this company called Georgetown Advisory, and it's got a website up there. I think it's georgetownadvisory.us, and basically it's saying that his company and him want to start advising foreign governments. It's supposedly a boutique advisory firm specializing in sovereign and strategic advisory. And that's a little weird for, the fact that he's working with, President Trump, and now he's seeking clients. And, what is he? Is he Joe Biden's son?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely shades of Hunter Biden here with all these different businesses, money flowing from one thing to the other. Now, let me ask you, in terms of that, isn't that a conflict of interest if he's working on the Trump campaign but advising foreign companies and institutions?
One would think, and if you go to the map, it says, they got places of operation all over the globe in Asia, Central Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia, and the United States. I don't know about any of that, but, it just doesn't necessarily look or feel great. And I'm not saying any of this, to make President Trump look bad, because we support him. We really want to see him get back in office. We just can't figure out what's going on, and, we don't know what to do about it. So
let's talk a little bit about him being intertwined with the Trump Save America PAC and Alina Habba. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Well, the Save America PAC is a political action committee that attorney Alina Habba is, I guess, now running. And it looks like he's been paid from that PAC. And I know that he's butted heads with just about everybody in the Trump organization, and the way that you survive in the Trump organization is you just don't try and push him out. Not that you could, because, the guy's a big guy, figuratively and literally, you don't do that. And the fact that Alina, in public knowledge all over the place, was moved to be part of that, just worried some of us, because she's a good spokesperson, she's a good lawyer. Why was she put there, and then why is there this tie between Boris's company and the Save America PAC. I don't know if it's a setup, just like Boris set up Christina Hobbs, the attorney that came in all of a sudden down in Florida and was pushed to deal with the FBI, and she felt set up. Is this a setup for Alina? Does she know this? We don't know, but it's just really, really strange. And we know that they're not best buddies, just something really odd, and we hope it works out well for Alina.
Okay, so now with this reporter, Nicole Wallace, right? This is the lady that he is potentially having an affair with?
Well, rumors are that that's what was going on. We don't know, we don't have any firsthand knowledge about that. But we do know that they were together while they worked on the McCain campaign.
They were together, like they were definitely having a relationship.
We know they were working together, and they developed a really strong friendship. We also know that Nicole was also the spokesperson for George W. Bush. And, there's a quote from MSNBC that says, she considered Mr. Epshteyn a friend and admired his political skills. He is everything you want in a surrogate because he believes in his candidate, said Ms. Wallace, now a political analyst for MSNBC. So that was 2016 in the New York Times, where she is flouting and she is saying great things about somebody who works for President Trump.
And she works side by side with Ari Melber.
Yeah, apparently they're best buddies. So I wouldn't be surprised if, to just divert attention, she doesn't do the fluff piece on him. She has her buddy Ari do it, to do anything to protect him and, destroy anybody who's not, Boris Epshteyn.
So Nicole got some information from Boris that nobody else had, supposedly. I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, without getting into details, everybody was kind of surprised that MSNBC and Nicole Wallace was able to do breaking stories about the Trump campaign. There was also another time where CNN got information before anything else, that it was leaked out, and nobody can figure out where it came from. A lot of us kind of thought, this is where it came from. We don't have any access to anybody's phones or emails or whatever, but that was the only thing that made sense, because the only person who's playing two sides here that we can see that we think is Boris. So, he's hated. He's hated by a lot of people. And, we just go back to what Tim Parlator said, and there was even a little less than a year ago a threatened coup by everybody that works for the Trump organization against Boris, that everybody threatened to quit unless he was fired. He survived that too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy stuff. And, we don't think it's helping, President Trump at all to have him around. He's never been a trial lawyer. The fact that he's a lawyer, he doesn't even say half the time that he's a lawyer. A lot of times he just goes around and says he's a consultant. So, and don't even get me started about, you're going to get me started about all of the indictments that's going on.
Let's talk about that now. This is the portion of the interview that, to me, gets really suspect as far as, what his intentions are here and who's protecting him. Because let's talk a little bit about the persecution of the Donald Trump campaign and who wasn't persecuted, which seems to be Boris Epshteyn over and over again. There's an example here of what happened with Fannie Willis. You want to dive into that?
Yeah, when everything started going down, and obviously Boris was acting, as some sort of legal counsel. He actually, I believe his title is the general counsel for the Trump organization, is his title. But all the attorneys report to him. So when that happened, now he's actually acting as an attorney. Supposedly he's got attorney-client privilege. But when things started going down in Georgia, and, before that in Washington, D.C., it was odd because, he was told to come in, he was subpoenaed. He didn't fight anything. He literally, took a trip and said, hey, let's talk. And I believe that he went and appeared before the grand jury, Jack Smith's grand jury. And not only that, but it's also been reported everywhere that he sat and met with the U.S. Attorney's Office that Jack Smith sat in on, to be interviewed. I believe it was more than a day. Now, I would think that an attorney for President Trump being interviewed by, Jack Smith's office would either be taking the Fifth Amendment because he was involved in some stuff, or would invoke attorney-client privilege. I don't know. I don't think any of that happened. Or that his own attorney, and I'm not even sure if, his attorney was there, protecting him, but his attorney was Todd Blanche. And Todd Blanche also represents President Trump. So we don't know how that works. If that's not a conflict of interest, I have no idea. But what happened after that, at least in the Jack Smith case, and I'm sorry to jump around, it gets confusing, is that everybody got indicted around Boris. Everybody got indicted, except Boris. And everybody believes that he's one of the unindicted co-conspirators there. And it's pretty clear if you read through it that he is, and everybody was guessing, and they guessed right. Okay, so you got that. And then you got Fani Willis in Georgia also inviting, Boris to come down and testify before a grand jury and to meet with her. And of course, he's more than happy to do that. And God knows what he did when he was down there. But all I know is that October 4th of 2023, Fani Willis files a petition, public knowledge, once again, petition for certificate of need for testimony before criminal prosecution pursuant to whatever, because the witness is from out of state. So it's a court order to make the witness testify. And Fani Willis has said that Boris Epshteyn is a key witness in the case against the defendants. One of the defendants being Donald Trump, the others, of course, in the separated trial, Kenneth Cheeseborough and Sidney Powell. Now, we were all thinking that, wow, what's it going to look like when that trial happens? And then Boris Epshteyn gets on the stand and testifies against President Trump's former attorneys. We were waiting with bated breath. That trial, I believe, was supposed to start on a Monday. And before then, Powell and Chesborough, I can't even say his name right, their plea deals, they accepted a plea deal and didn't go forward. But we understood that before the Friday before the trial was supposed to start, all of their plea deals included jail time. And for some reason, I think, and we're guessing, that somebody realized that if Boris has to go on the stand and testify that his time with representing Trump is over. So out of nowhere, apparently, they were offered deals that involved no jail time. And just pleading to, certain lower charges. That was suspicious. And the fact that he's considered like the main witness against President Trump and against everybody else there, is everybody, playing Helen Keller on this one? I mean, how do you avoid that? And how, if that's the case, is he still serving in any way, shape, or form as legal counsel for Donald Trump? And that was the eye opener for us. Is that all right? So now I think he's unindicted co-conspirator number 3 in the Georgia case, and he's unindicted co-conspirator number 6 in the Jack Smith case, and he's unindicted. What does that tell anybody? Everybody's indicted but him. He's unindicted. What's going on? He's got the same lawyer as Donald Trump, Todd Blanche, who he brought in. So, you go figure, you draw your own conclusions about that, but that smells. That just smells.
I mean, I have a note here that when he was unindicted, according to the indictments that were coming down in Fulton County, that's when he flipped. I mean, I know this is assuming, but is this what you're assuming, that this is the point where he officially flipped and started helping the other side?
I don't know when it was, but apparently as soon as they asked him to come down and testify, he did. He helped them, and now he's the main witness. And talk about flipping, well, I know we skipped over something before, but and I think it's important not to miss this point, because this is really what controls everything. And then we can get into, go and finish this up. But, after he did the Invest in Moscow thing, which was odd to say the least, it was rumored that maybe he was working with the FSB, Russian CIA, whatever. If that was the case, then apparently people think that in order for him to continue here, because he wasn't a citizen, that he needed to work for the intelligence community. And the rumor is that, probably the CIA or the FBI got their hands on him and said, hey, we know what's going on with you. We think you could be useful to us. So from now on, you work for us. You do what we say, and then we will have your back, and we guarantee you protection, and we guarantee you a ride to the top. And if you think about it, it all makes sense, because he's been able to stay one step ahead of everything. He's untouchable. He's not that smart. He's got no experience in any kind of trials like this, yet he's running everybody's show. And he's, he's the new Teflon Don. It doesn't make any sense. So we all think that he's actually working with, the intelligence community against former President Trump.
Wow. All right. So let's talk about, so according to Fani Willis, he will be testifying against the defendants, but never was indicted there.
Right. Exactly. And it says, if you look in her filed affidavit, that it says that he will provide evidence, against all of the defendants, with reference to their attempt to disrupt and delay the January 6th joint session of Congress. Okay, and that is unbelievable. So they're talking about, him being involved, very closely involved with John Eastman, with Kenneth Chesborough, with Sidney Powell on all of the counts, most of the counts, in the conspiracy as it relates to, certain appearances that he took place at. Look, he was on the stage with Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani and Chesborough and all these guys, and everybody on that stage got indicted except for Boris.
Wow.
Come on. Wow. I mean, I wasn't born yesterday.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read these and stop me, if there's anything you want to add. So Washington, D.C. resident Boris Epshteyn is a necessary and material witness to the proof of the state's case, specifically as defendant Sidney Powell's culpability and defendant Kenneth Chesborough's culpability. So this is a statement that Fani Willis made?
Apparently, yeah.
Boris Epshteyn will provide evidence to the jury of Sidney Powell's involvement in the conspiracy, including without limitation as it relates to her appearance at the press conference on November 19, 2020. That's the press conference that Boris was at as well.
Yes.
Okay. And then next point. Boris Epshteyn will also provide evidence to the jury of Kenneth Chesborough's involvement in the conspiracy, including without limitation as it relates to the communication with co-defendants John Eastman and Rudy Giuliani regarding the attempt to disrupt and delay the January 6th joint session of Congress.
Yeah, that's part of the affidavit. And look, read it. Just read it, the plain words. It says that he is going to testify against these people, against Rudy, against Sidney, against everybody. That he is one of the main witnesses. He's flipped. Hello. I mean, can people read English? If he's flipping on these guys, he's gonna flip on President Trump as well. So will it be, my question is this, and picture this, okay? It's the trial of the Georgia matter. You got Boris Epshteyn sitting at the table with Donald Trump as his attorney. And then Fani Willis, or one of her attorneys, because I doubt that, she will do it herself. We call as a prosecution witness Mr. Boris Epshteyn, and he gets up from sitting next to Donald Trump as his attorney, goes on the witness stand, and then starts ratting out his boss.
Well, that seems like a lot of conflict of interest right there.
I think that should be enough self-criminal. It's violative of, what I understand to be the ethical procedures and the disciplinary rules in the state where he's licensed. I think it's New York and New Jersey. I don't know, but, hey, there is also a complaint against him with the Bar Association, as there was with Rudy and everybody else. And get this, they're all filed at the same time by, I think, a company called the 65 Project or whatever. It's like a Get Trump organization. Everybody's complaints have been moved forward. Boris's complaint, his bar complaint, it's stuck in the mud, not going anywhere. What does that tell you? All coincidences?
Wow. I mean, we hear stories like that all the time about, essentially the bar protecting corrupt judges, corrupt lawyers, unless it gets too noisy. So you think that this is just another mouthpiece of the deep state that is actually protecting Boris Epshteyn through the bar?
I think that he's just got protection everywhere. He's got protection in Arizona when he hits a guy in the face. He's got protection in Arizona when he grabs a girl allegedly. He's got protection, in Georgia from all these indictments. He's got protection against Jack Smith from all the indictments. What else? He's got protection from these companies that he was supposedly the managing director of legal and business affairs that all went bankrupt, where people are banned from FINRA. I mean, what's going on here? Does anybody see a pattern besides me?
Like that he's basically untouchable.
Yeah, he's protected because they need him. They need him to continue doing what he's I'm going to say allegedly doing. If you look at everything, you have to be able to discuss openly and honestly exactly what may be happening here. You present the facts, much like a lot of people do out there, and you decide for yourself what's going on. Because you know what, it's obvious to a lot of people, and now maybe if enough people talk about this, maybe President Trump will realize that he's got a major problem.
And you're saying that a lot of people within Donald Trump's organization, including lawyers, present and former, feel the same way about this issue?
Absolutely. Really, absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna keep reading this. Boris Epshteyn, based on the information set forth above, is a necessary and material witness. He possesses unique knowledge concerning communications between himself and Sidney Powell, as well as communications between himself and Kenneth Chesebro and other known and unknown individuals involved in the multi-state coordinated efforts to influence the result of the November 2020 election in Georgia and elsewhere.
Yeah, that's what it says. Wow. So he is a prosecution witness against President Trump. Anybody else read that besides you and me? I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on here, could we talk a little bit about this Todd Blanche Esquire situation?
Well, Todd was brought in by Boris, and he represents Boris in all of these legal matters. He also represents President Trump in a lot of these legal matters. He's, one of the counsel listed in all these cases. So the question then becomes, isn't that a conflict of interest? I mean, look, Boris himself is probably in a conflicting state, having all of the, being a witness and still representing Trump. But, Todd also representing him. I mean, I'm not the only one who's pointed this out. There's a lot of articles about that. So I think it's a problem. And I think, the 65's project complaint against him being stalled and him continuing is just absolutely unbelievable that nobody's done anything about this, and that he's allowed to continue, even though there is a complaint against him with the Bar Association. He's got the conflict of interest with himself, and Todd Blanche is representing this guy and President Trump in the same proceeding when he's a witness against President Trump. Look, I can't tell you, how these rules go, but plain English is plain English, and Todd should definitely step down, and Boris should go somewhere, somewhere else. But it is absolutely horrible to read this stuff.
So talk about the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, called two Trump allies to the witness for the prosecution. Lynn Wood, one of Trump's former attorneys who has cut a deal and now is cooperating with the prosecution, and Boris. Neither of these men have been indicted, and both have spoken openly with the prosecutor. They're both being treated identically, but only Wood has been exposed so far as cooperating.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, come on. I mean, that is what it is, It's Lynn Wood has signed and is public gun and is cooperating, and Boris is cooperating.
Is there anything we didn't touch upon in this episode that you'd want to mention?
I just think that, there's so much here for people to, to go into, but it really looks like, you forget about everything else, forget about what he did with Russia, forget about, all of the frauds that he was supposedly involved in with these investment banks. You forget about him being arrested twice, for assault and for groping. You can't forget about these indictments in these cases, and you can't forget about what Tim Parlator said, and you can't forget about it, everything else that's happened. And the fluff pieces that MSNBC does on him, and the release of information that CNN has before anybody else, and MSNBC has supposedly through Nicole Wallace. All this cannot be all coincidences. And the fact that he is as obnoxious and a large oaf that he is, never had any trial experience that we can find doing anything like this, and he expects all of these attorneys to take his advice. Do you know how much of his advice has been detrimental to the president so far? I mean, he's even, from what we've heard, he's even, Steve Bannon, who is his best buddy, He supposedly was the guy who told Steve Bannon, hey, don't go in front of the Congress for that subpoena. It's okay, nothing will happen to you, and look what's happened. Not good advice, we don't think. But just do your own research for yourself. Look at this stuff, and if President Trump is listening, I mean, look, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I mean, this guy is going to bury you. Michael Cohen, who flipped, he had nothing. He looked like a fool, and he just was making up stuff. And I think that Michael Cohen just flipped because they threatened his wife. That's what I think. I don't think he wanted to flip, but, between President Trump and his wife, I think Michael chose his wife. And I'm not saying anything about his character, good or bad, but Boris is just throwing President Trump under the bus here, and it looks like it, and that's our impression, and we just hope that, what we're doing here will maybe wake some people up to the facts, because, we want to see President Trump save this country, and we don't think that Boris Epshteyn has his best interests at heart.
Wow. This has been some amazing information for the viewers out there. Do your own research. This is obviously a lot of things that are available in the public domain. You will find all this information below with links. And this is a perfect opportunity for all the independent journalists out there, what they call citizen journalists, to really do their own research and follow this story. Let's find out what's been happening here. We thank you for joining us for this episode, and definitely make sure you check out this information below. We'd love to hear what you think about this particular story, and I will see you all on the next episode of Blood Money.